Good afternoon, dear learners. Today we are going to start with block 4 of MMPC001 and cover the 5 units that we have in block 4. Let me first start presenting and then we'll come to the topics that we are supposed to cover today. Okay, are we able to see the screen? Is everyone able to see the screen?
Not yet.
I didn't get you. Is it visible? Is the document visible to all of you?
No, ma.
It's not visible? Give me a second. Now is it visible?
Yes, it's visible now.
Okay. So today we are starting with Unit 10, which is Organization, Structure and Design. Most of the content of Organization, Structure and Design in Unit 10 has already been covered with uh, the unit number, I think, 7 for organization, the process of organization. But there are certain basic elements in organization structure which we need to cover separately. So we are dealing with those topics today. Okay. Now, when we were looking at the organization process, we said that the process of organization involves, there is one step in the process of organization which involves creating departments. What are these departments? The departments are grouping of activities together into, discrete segments and then calling them departments. Now, this departmentation basically is horizontal differentiation of tasks or activities into discrete segments, as I said, right? Now, aim of departmentalization is to take advantage of what? Two things: division of labor and specialization. In the sense that if people come together and do similar kinds of activities, they become experts in those activities, and then we can use we can take the benefit of the specialization which occurs in that scenario. Okay. And when we were discussing the process of departmentation, we looked at the various bases on which departments can be created, but we could not go into details because that was not required there. Today we're going to look at the basis of departmentation in detail, right? Now, the first basis of departmentation, on the basis of which departments are created in organizations, is called functional departmentalization. Functional departmentalization means that similar kind of activities, similar work is going to go in one department. It is the most widely used departmentalization method, and the advantages are, as we said, it is simple form of grouping because everyone can understand that if we are doing similar work, we are sitting together in one department. People feel secure because they know what exactly work is happening in the department, and they can also ask for help from each other because it is the same kind of work that everyone else is also doing. Development of expertise is there. You can plan your work and control your work and save money on it because you are doing similar kinds of activities and helping each other out. Negatives are, sometimes people might feel that our department is more important than the other department, right? We are doing most of the work, the other people are not doing most of the very important works. In cases like that, sub goal loyalties possibly can arise, in the sense that people would start working for their own goals rather than the organizational goals. Similarly, managers who are looking at functional areas would not develop expertise in other functional areas. And when an organization is geographically very complex and is present in a lot number of places, in those cases, functional departmentalization might not work because you need to carry out same functions in different geographical areas. Now, how do you coordinate amongst yourself? Right? So that is one, functional departmentalization. Second basis on which departments are created is the product departmentalization, wherein if a product is very successful, or in large organizations which have a wide product range and a number of successful products, individual attention is required for every product or every product line. Individual attention would mean they require similar kind of raw material, they need similar infrastructure, they need similar expertise, they need similar kind of marketing strategies, similar distribution networks. Let's take an example of a multi-divisional firm like P&G. Everyone must have heard of that name, Procter and Gamble. It's a multinational firm, US based. They have a whole lot of products, whole lot of categories. So their FMCG division would be different, right? Their hygiene division would be different. Toiletries division would be different. So for a particular kind of product line, they would have a different department. Why? Because they want to pay attention to those product lines specifically. Advantages: if a department is created on the basis of a product, what happens? Attention to the product is there, because the team which is working with the product department would only focus on that product or that product line. They would only be concerned about the performance of that product line, right? And the top management would sit free, because they have appointed people specifically for those specific products. So responsibility, motivation, all these factors are there. And people who are in the product team, whether they are from various functions, they would be working for the success of those particular products. You can see these kinds of departmentalizations in a whole lot of places. Even banks have them, because bank has a loan division, they have a retail banking division, they have some other current accounts kind of facilities, and whole gamut of financial products that they are offering nowadays. Negatives is, obviously, when you have different people devoted to different product lines, you have duplication of facilities and staff. And sometimes, if one product is not doing very well, or one product is not that successful, then the other product, there would be certain facilities lying with the not so successful product, which is underutilized because it is not being used that much there. You would obviously need more people, extra sales force, to take care of different product lines. Third is regional departmentalization, wherein if the organization is geographically distributed, they would have to open their different regional offices, okay, to take care of those particular regions. Again, what are the advantages here? If regional offices are created to take care of business in regional areas, specific regional areas, then certain advantages are there. Why? One is that they would be able to adapt to the local situations, local conditions, local expectations of the consumers. Okay. Again, whenever there is departmentalization, people are motivated to perform, in the sense that they own the department and they feel the need, the urge to perform for the department. Okay. Now, in geographical departmentalization or regional departmentalization, regional heads or people who are looking after the regional offices would develop as top level managers. Reason being, they are supposed to look after or look at all the various functions of management, all the different tasks associated, to properly handle the business, to take care of the business at the regional level. So they are doing the conceptual work also, they are taking care of the functional areas also, they are looking at the financial aspects also, all those things. They are even procuring raw material and maybe looking after the distribution of the product also. So those advantages are there. Negative, obviously, again, as with the other kind of departmentalizations, duplication of efforts, duplication of resources. Their competition among region also can happen, which not necessarily is a bad thing, but competition, if it is there, it can be a good thing also. We already discussed last time also, the departmentalization on the basis of time happens when we want to utilize the resources fully. We don't want them to lie idle for maybe somewhere around 8 hours to 10 hours during the night time. So when we want to utilize capital to the fullest, we can even have a departmentalization on the basis of time, and we can have different sets of workers come in the same facility at different times, where you're going to utilize the machinery fully, because 8 hours one shift comes in, the second shift comes at the next 8 hours, and the night shift comes at another 8 hours. So the 24 hours, for the 24 hours we are utilizing our capital and our machinery completely. That is not, it is, we don't have any underutilization of resources. But negatives is that whenever some accident occurs, whenever there's some repair to be done, one the problem in one shift will be carried over to the next shift also. More breakage, wear and tear. Why? Because it's being utilized. When we are talking of optimum, they are actually, utilizing the machinery or the capital to a maximum level. So obviously there would be more breakage and wear and tear. Sometimes it is difficult to measure performance also, because it is a continuous process going on in the utility, and it becomes difficult to measure. The next form of departmentalization, on the basis of which the organization structure is created. Why are we looking at the departmentalization basis? Because on the basis of these departmentalization uh, methods, the organization structure is going to be created. Okay, we will come to that. Process departmentalization means that when the business process or the production process or the value chain can be broken down into discrete, distinct parts, we can have the process departmentalization, wherein the first process takes place in some place, the second process takes place somewhere else. The different stages of the process can be broken down, and then they can be converted and made into different departments. We took the example of petroleum. Okay, so it is extracted elsewhere, or in, for that matter, any raw material. It is extracted in one place, processed in some other place, refined in some other place, and then ultimately used in some other place. Okay, what are the advantages? The advantages are efficient use of equipment or machinery. Why? Again, because of specialization, because a particular machinery or particular equipment is being used for a specific simple work. Okay, little chance of underutilization, because why? From point A to point B, if the material is moving, B work is done in the B place and A work is done in the A place, and it is a constant process going on there. So there is little chance of underutilization. Principle of specialization obviously comes into play, because a specific work is being done. There is no it is simple and easy to do that work. Okay, now the next departmentalization form is called divisional structure. What do you mean by divisional structure? Most of the bigger large multi-product organizations, they typically follow combined basis. They do not just follow the functional form of departmentalization, or the regional form of departmentalization, or the product form of departmentalization. They have a whole gamut of working. Their working is very complex. They are in all the they are spread over a large geographical area. They have a number of products. They have obviously have to do the 4 or 5 basic functions of management. They have a variety of customers. So in that case, they will have to design their structure in a way wherein every product, every functional area, every region is properly administrated. Okay, there we see these divisional structures. You can see a small example here of a Nestle organizational structure. I don't know whether it is true or not, but at least it gives us an idea that CEO, all the regional heads, all the product heads are going to report to the CEO, and then they have different functional areas for every product. They might even have geographical offices, right? So divisional structures are the most complex structures, and majorly all big multi-product companies have followed the divisional structure. Now, let us come to the actual definition of organizational structure. At the moment, we just looked at what are the basis for department creation. Now, the formal structural framework of the organization is known as the organizational structure. That means the organizational structure depicts how the organizational departments, how the functional areas, how the products, how the regional offices are interconnected, and how are they reporting, to whom are they reporting, and in what manner is the communication line flowing, right? It is two dimensional, it is horizontal and vertical both. It looks like a chart like the one we saw for Nestle at the moment, just right now. Okay, the horizontal dimension depicts the various departments which exist, and the vertical dimension refers to the hierarchy of authority relationships and how it flows. When you put down the organization structure in black and white in the form of a chart, it is called the organization chart. So a formal organization is depicted by means of an organization chart, right? At any given point of time, what is the communication flow, who is responsible, who has authority, how does the authority flow, what are the responsibilities of the various people or various positions in the organization or the departments in the organization, uh, and how are they connected, who is coordinating with whom, who is accountable, who is in charge for what office. All this thing is there in the organization chart. Having an organization chart helps in fact everyone within the organization and outside the organization to understand what is the size of the organization and what are the working relationships like in the organization. They also help to show what is the span of management, is it effective or not, is there balance of authority and responsibility relationships, or is it biased in some way, or are there any deficiencies, or are we placing too much of stress on a particular area, right, and ignoring some other areas, or are we placing too much of stress or importance to certain positions in the organization. All that can be seen when you look at the organization chart. Okay, organization structures vary greatly from being highly centralized to highly decentralized. So there is a wide variety of organizational structures that we can see in the practical world. Okay, so they can be mechanistic in the sense of they are very rigid, which cannot, like generally what happens in government structures, very mechanistic, very pyramid shaped, and centralization of authorities at the top. Communication generally flows from top to the bottom, and very narrow span of management because it is being controlled very um, nicely. Nice is not the right word, but okay. And organic structures are flatter, and there is more free flowing communication, which is basically which you can see in basic, modern organizations, places like the modern businesses like the software companies. They have basically organic structures because people can move from here to there, they can be shifted from here to there, they can be brought together in a team, they can be brought together in a particular project, and once the project is complete they can go back to their own positions. Advertising has those kind of structures. New startups which are coming up, they have these organic structures where nothing is fixed, everyone can do any work that is assigned to them. So that is an organic structure. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the organization structures discussion. In case you have any doubts, I said I'm open to queries. Whenever you have a query of some sort, you can even put it down in the chat box, and from there we can take it up. Okay. Next unit is organizational communication process. Right? Now, communication is very simple term, and I think you have a subject also. So I think you should be aware and familiar with most of the terms that we are going to discuss today. So we will run through these topics, and you should be able to follow, I suppose. Communication, is an exchange of facts, ideas, opinions, or emotions between two or more people. And what is the importance of communication in an organization? It is extremely important because anything that happens in an organization happens on the basis of communication. Without communication, nothing exists, right? No tasks can be achieved. Now, what forms of communication can we see in an organization? We can see oral forms of communication in the form of directions and instructions and discussions and meetings. Those are all oral forms of communication. We have written communication because memos, reports, notices, all these are written forms of communication. Non-verbal communication, is it there in the organization? Yes, it is there in the organization. It's an integral part of any communication process. Okay, non-verbal would mean, what do you mean by non-verbal, by the way? Are you there, all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Non-verbal is, I'm asking you in between because I need to know whether I've lost the network or not, and if you're paying attention. Non-verbal would be gestures, body language. All those things are important because our words are supported by our non-verbal communication, right? Our words and actions are supported. Actions obviously are a part of non-verbal communication. Okay, let's look at the types of communication in an organization, which again, as I said, you must have already looked at earlier in some other subject. In the organization, there are two kinds of communication happening. One is formal and the other is informal. We would feel that only formal communication is important, but informal communication is also very important. Now, what kinds of formal communication can be seen in an organization? We see downward communication, we see upward communication, we see horizontal communication, and we see external communication. Now, what is downward communication? Communication which comes from the superior to the subordinate is downward communication. It might flow between just two individuals, it might flow from the top of the organization to the bottom of the organization. What is it meant for? It is meant for directing people, it is meant for defining jobs, defining activities, defining tasks. It is meant to inform people about a lot of developments, about rules and regulations, about expectations, any kind of information. And it is also meant to administer rewards or punishments. Okay, so one communication is flowing from top to the bottom, which is downward communication. There is one type of communication which is flowing from the bottom to the top of the organization, which is useful in giving feedback, bringing forth grievances, also generating suggestions, which are very important for the organization. All these forms of communication are important for the organization. Right, so we cannot say that downward communication is the only thing which is important. We also need upward communication, because only then people become actively involved in the organization, right? Horizontal communication is communication which happens between people of the same level, and it is required because we also need to have some coordination and cooperation, and all the departments or all the organizational activities are actually interlinked and help each other out, so it helps in coordination. External communication is basically communication between the organization and the external stakeholders of the organization. It would help in image building because we have our own PR cell, we have our press releases, we have a whole lot of activities which we do, a whole lot of communication which we send to our shareholders, to the government, to the public, which helps in building our image in the organization, in the environment. Similarly, we also gather market information. We gather a lot of information which comes in. That's also a part of the external communication. We might do some researches. We might be dealing with consultants. We might be dealing with people who are helping us build our product, right? We might also be dispersing some information to maybe shareholders, sending newsletters, stuff like this, right? So that is external communication. There are four basic types of communication which are happening: are downward, upward, horizontal, and external communication, right? Informal communication. Now, informal communication, is it important? Yes, it is important. What is informal communication? Informal communication is anything which is not defined in the organizational communication methods. So when you're talking to your friends in the organization, talking to your superiors, just like that, chatting, chit chatting, that is informal communication, and it is an important part of the organizational culture. Reason being that we are all social beings. We have to interact, and we have to feel in place. We have to feel comfortable if we want to perform well in the organization. But there are two things in the informal communication. One is grapevine, and another is rumor. uh, Grapevine is something which is useful because we managers might use the grapevine or the informal communication channels to gather information, excuse me, which would be which most probably is true. and therefore useful. It's quite possible that some kind of informal communication is not true and it is termed as rumor. It could possibly create some problems in the organization, so that's not good. Process of communication. Let's come to process of communication. This is a simple linear process which starts with the generation of an idea. Whenever you want to communicate, the sender needs to have some information or an idea which he or she wants to communicate, or whether it's the subordinate, whether it's the superior, whether it is the CEO of the organization or the gatekeeper in the organization. There has to be something which needs to be communicated, right? So that is the generation of the idea. This idea is encoded into words or letters, written words or oral words, or maybe in any manner. It is encoded into language basically. Transmission is using some channel to transmit that. This transmitted information, encoded information, is received by the receiver, who decodes the language or the message which has come to him, and then takes either takes action on it, or passes it on to some other concerned person, or and then gives the feedback to the generator of the idea, which is the who's the sender. This is very basic. In actuality, when you bring it into practice, there are not many things involved over here, but we are not supposed to go into details because that's a different subject already that you've studied, right? But yes, this is the basic process of communication. The whole process of communication for anything, it is there for the written communication, it is there for the oral communication, it is there for all kinds of communications that we've seen up till now in this lesson. And this whole process happens, though we might be able to see certain stages and we might not be able to see certain stages or segregate certain stages in simple ways. But yes, all these stages do happen, and these are stepwise progression of a transmission of an idea or a process of communication. Okay, and there are two things over here. During the process of communication, in fact, is not very smooth every time. At each step there is some problem which can be there. Like, for example, and if you look at it, that in a way, most of the problems in the world, I think 90% of the problems in the world are because of the problems in communication. We may want to say something, but we actually say something. We may feel something and we may say something else, right? We may be very clear on what we want to communicate, but when we put it into words, it becomes different. Or we choose the wrong method of communication. Similarly, the person who's receiving the communication message, he's receiving it in a different state of mind, so he's possibly not able to actually understand the gist of the communication. He may not be fluent in the language that in which you've been sending the message, so he might not actually get the true meaning of the message. Or he may be affected in some way, or you might be affected in some way, in some psychological way, where your coding or your transmission is not up to the mark, or his receiving and his decoding is not up to the mark, right? These problems which occur during the process of communication are termed as barriers to communication. Apart from barriers to communication, there could be some other things which are called noises, which is the process is right, but there is some kind of a problem in between. So those are noises, right? Let's look at the barriers to communication. There's a whole lot of um, different types of barriers. Let us look at them one by one. Are we there in the class, in the counseling?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So we have the semantic barriers, which are basically related to languages. Semantic is related to language. Semantic barriers could be the sender and the receiver do not understand languages. They understand the language, but the context for words and symbols is possibly different. Someone of them has poor vocabulary and uses technical jargon which the other person does not understand. Physical barriers could be noise, physical blocks. Physical blocks is maybe a glass door in between. Noise means some outside noise. Improper time in the sense that when I am talking, I am putting the message very clearly, but the time is not proper for the other person to actually receive it. Maybe he's in a hurry, or she's in a hurry, or maybe he's busy with something else. He might not be able to receive the message properly. Distance obviously is a big problem. Inadequate information can create misunderstandings, and overloaded information can also not be that useful because then the attention span goes down. Organizational barriers, certain organizational rules and regulations or chain of command, they also create problems. Non-availability of communication means create a problem. Maybe you're not able to schedule a meeting, or how do you communicate with the others? Wrong choice of channel can be a problem. You should be actually sending a written message, but you have actually used the telephone to send that message. Maybe it is distorted, it is misunderstood. Hierarchical relationship obviously create a problem because there is ego involved. There is some kind of personal barrier involved. So hierarchical relationships also create organizational communication barriers. Psychological barriers. Psychological barriers are basically at both the ends. The sender also might be actually influenced by psychological barriers. Then the receiver also might be influenced by psychological barriers. These barriers are of our mind, they are in our mind, and we are possibly sometimes we don't understand that we are being impacted by these barriers. Selective perception and selective distortion are two psychological concepts. Selective perception means that I listen to only what I want to listen, I don't hear the rest of the things. As simple as that. Selective distortion is I would tweak something according to my own thinking, right? Premature evaluation, before you hear someone out, you are actually thinking that this is what they want to say because of some words that they used. Again, you're not getting the true meaning of the message. Different comprehensions of reality. You're not able to comprehend. You are not able to actually see the situation as the other person is looking at. Someone might be perceiving a problem and trying to communicate to you that look, the productivity is going down to some extent, but you are not able to see the problem. You think that it's a regular thing, not an issue at all. There is no problem at all. So these are different comprehensions of reality. Attitudes of superiors and attitudes of subordinates, fine. You need to have a balanced attitude to be able to communicate with people. You need to be emotionally intelligent, you need to be socially intelligent, you need to be intelligent in that, in all aspects, to be able to understand the communications properly. And these two problems can occur with the superiors also and the subordinates also. Poor listening, you don't want to listen, you're not listening, so you won't get the communication properly, you won't be able to understand the message properly. Ego and emotions, we all know them, right? How do you ensure effective communication in an organization? Using of a when you use appropriate language, a language which is understood by the people to whom you're communicating, that will help you. Proper channel will help you. If it's something important, written communication needs to be used. If it's something else, if it's simple, then you can use oral communication channels. Effective listening, everyone needs to practice that. Encouraging two-way, it's not two-way, it is two-way communication or feedback. You may feel that you are communicating very well, but only when you get the feedback and only when you get to understand what the other person have understood, you would be in a position to judge whether you've communicated properly. Making best use of body language, right? Synergistic environment would mean harmony and environment of harmony. Avoiding halo effect, not being influenced by someone's personality characteristics when you're judging the communication. That is what is avoiding the halo effect. Right. So communication, I think we should be in a position to understand. And let us come to an important topic, which is organizational change. Excuse me. Just give me a second, please. Okay. Everyone's able to see the slide? It's Unit 13, organizational change.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now, this is a new topic, which is a little different from what has been covered till now. And this is talking of a phenomena which is not a basic management function, but yes, it's an important management function because when we look at the environment, the businesses today are existing in an environment which is changing very fast. Okay. And eh, organizations and businesses need to be equipped to handle change. Okay. So, organizational change basically is the process through which the organization undergoes any transformation internally in its methods, structures, processes, etc., for any reason. It can happen due to a number of reasons. And here, like, that change, the organization change can also happen when the organization actually is not wanting to change. But we are not looking at that. It has been pressurized to some extent to change. We are not looking at those kind of reasons. We are looking at organizational change where the organization actually is planning to change and how they go about implementing that change, though that change might be required because of changes in the environment. Okay, now why do we need organizational change, and do the organizations need to change? Yes, organizations need to change quite often, because when we were discussing strategy we said that we might be thinking about building our business, the organization might be thinking about going about its business, and on the basis of that they would be planning their objectives, and the whole organizational functions would be planned on the basis of what they want to achieve, basically on the basis of the organizational goals. But since they are not isolated, they are in an environment which is very dynamic and fast changing, and there are a lot many opportunities and threats in the environment. The organization will have to make changes from time to time, right? Now, why does the organization need to change? Does anyone have an observation? Okay, I don't think so. So, why does the organization need change? The organization would need change majorly because of two things. When there are major changes in the external environment, when there are major changes in the
Ma, I,
technology, what happened? Do you have any observation? What exactly? Is there a query? Okay, let's continue. So, when there are major changes in the external environment, these major changes can make the existing structure, the management practices, culture, or technologies that we've been following till now obsolete. And they would force us to make changes. Like, let's take an example: petroleum. Now, petroleum is a very, pricey asset nowadays. If one fine day, in fact, it's happening, if the availability of petroleum goes down to a great extent, that would be one external change which would force us, to go and change our technologies. The changes in the information technology sector, they would force us to, the coming of AI possibly, that would force us to make changes possibly in the way we work. So anyway, any major changes in the external environment would require a change in the organization also, right? Because we might become obsolete, especially if it happens in the industry that we are in. Okay, so if you're in the software industry, you would be influenced by the new technologies coming in. If you're in the mobile phone industry, you would be influenced by the new technologies in the mobile sector that are starting to come in. Okay, secondly, with the growth of the organization, sometimes, not sometimes, as the organization grows, its communication, its decision making systems may become choked. Whatever was working yesterday might not work today. Rewards and punishment systems may become ineffective. Communication systems may become, monotonous. People might not maybe listen to what's happening in, they might not follow the communication systems. Reporting systems might fail. Personal or interpersonal relations possibly might deteriorate because of some political issues in the organization. So, in scenarios like this, where the internal systems are not effective, have become ineffective, the management will have to make some changes. Okay, so that is what is the need for organizational change. Now, this is a very important model. I'm not sure if it's there in our study material, but this model is Larry E. Grainer's growth model, which says that as and when organization grow, any organization, if you start with a small organization, as and when it goes through 5 stages, right? Each stage is basically when it enters, because first when it starts working, then it's very smooth, everyone's very enthusiastic, the employees are enthusiastic, the owner is enthusiastic, and there's promise all around. So the environment is very peaceful. But towards the end of that period, a crisis happens, situations change, and you need to change, the organization needs to change over. We'll look at the 5 stages right now, but in any case, the gist of it is that any organization will go through 5 stages. All these stages, at the end of each stage, there will be a problem, there will be a crisis. That crisis, if it is resolved properly, will lead to the next stage. But in case that crisis is not resolved, the organizational growth will stop. Okay, so let us look at this chart, which shows us how the organization grows. There. Now, this chart actually is showing us the relationship between the age of the organization and the size of the organization. Right? Can you give me a second, please? Yeah. When the organization is first created, like I said, the organization is very young and small, right? The organization is is new to the market. The employees are new. The employees are very enthusiastic. Even the owner is very enthusiastic. Salaries are modest, but they are working on the basis of a promise by the owner that you will get, once we grow, you will get good salaries. I will be able to pay you better and all that stuff. So promise is there, right? But as employees grow, informal communications between the leader and the employees, right? And promises do not work. So what happens? there is a need for change now, because people stop working, they lose interest, all that happens. Now there is a need for some kind of proper direction to channelize their energies towards the work, towards working towards the organizational goals. So this crisis is known as the crisis of leadership. Why? Because now the owner or the people who are the managers of the organization will have to understand how to motivate the employees further, how to give them directions so that they are able to work now properly now, how to create communication channels which are more effective. Because still now in the first phase the communication channels were not very formal, and they were not possibly, they were just it was just based on the personal power of the people who were leading the organization, right? So this crisis is called the crisis of leadership. If the owners of the organization, they are able to design communication systems properly, they are able to somehow retain the employees, and make further promise and give them an environment which is appealing to them, then the organization will grow further, right? There will be a functional structure, they will have to introduce a functional structure, they will have to give incentives for work, they will have to establish some kind of work standards, and now the organization will smoothly grow and become a little more larger, more diverse, right? But what will happen is, now since more directions are being given, so these people are now, when the organization has grown, their lower levels have also grown, there are more people in the organization, and who is given directions? Directions are being given by the top level people only, right? Because they were the people who worked towards creating the organization. They are giving directions. So now since the employees who are there in the organization since long, they have become more experienced, they would start resenting these directions, and they would want, what would they want now? They would want some kind of freedom to work. They would need to get some authority to work. Okay, so there is a need for delegation now, and this crisis is called the autonomy crisis, the crisis of autonomy, right? Fine. What would the organizational managers do? They would give autonomy to these employees, delegate authority and responsibility to them. Now they would start feeling important, and then the organization will enter into another smooth phase of growth. This will go on till the employees are able to properly, do their work, and smooth functioning is there. The communication systems have already been established. Now what will happen is, since delegation has happened, people are have been given the power to do things, authority has been delegated, what would they do? They would start taking things for granted. The organization will lose control on what is happening in the organization, right? There would be certain areas where people would start doing things on their own rather than thinking about the benefit of the organization, or rather than coordinating and cooperating with the others. Now we need to do what? We need to have coordination between people. They need to understand that the whole organization has to will exist properly only when there is no conflict and there is no personal interest involved. Okay, this crisis is known as the crisis of control. You can see it in the chart. When the crisis of control arises, the top management has to look for ways to find coordinating mechanism. New technologies could be brought in, right? uh, People can be encouraged to go for meetings, go for outings, those kind of things, so that there is smooth functioning in the organization. But once this coordination thing mechanism is set in, you would know by experience that when we start interlinking tasks with each other, red tapeism enters, in the sense that I was not able to do this work because X person was not able to give me the right information. I could not complete this work because Y person was not able to send me the material. Those kind of blame games can start, right? This crisis will again lead to problems in the organization, and this crisis is known as the crisis of red tapeism. When the organization makes efforts, when the top management makes efforts to handle this red tapeism and fix responsibilities and take people to task and teach them how to collaborate rather than coordinate and cooperate for the benefit of the organization, and puts in place self-control mechanisms where people are trained that they have to work for the organization rather than their own self-interest, or rather than their own egos and whims and fancies, then the organization grows further, and then so on and so forth. Next stage possibly uh, could be something else. So every organization, what we mean to say here is, what this model tells us is that every organization in the course of its growth and its existence and its life, I think you know that every organization has a life. Nothing is forever, nothing is infinite. So every organization goes through a variety of changes in its lifespan. Five of them have been depicted here in this model. But it brings us to at least one observation, that nothing can be smooth for a long time. There will be problems in between. In the organization, there will be problems in between, problems like leadership, problems of autonomy, problems of control, problems of something else, you know. And then the organization will have to make some changes, adjust itself, and then enter into the next phase of growth and smooth functioning. Right? Okay. Let's come to the action on the part of the organization. We've seen that changes occur in the environment, and the need for change occurs. But what we need to see now is that how do we actually implement change? Okay. So we come to strategy of planned change. An effective manager does not let change happen as it will. He initiates planned change strategy for this, which has three components. So when you're talking about change, there are three components to that planned change. One is the dimension of change. What needs to be changed? In the sense, do we need to change the communication channels? Do we need to change? What exactly do we need to change? Second, the process of change. And third, element of strategy of change, of planned change, is the introduction of change. How do you introduce change in the organization? Up till now, we've seen that change is an inevitable part of the existence of an organization, right? Okay, what do you mean by the dimension of change? Dimension of change includes four interacting variables. By dimension, we mean that what is it that we want to change? Obviously, we are not going to change everything in the organization. That also can happen, possibly when an organization is maybe not doing very well. They might call in some consultants and they might want to change a lot of things about the organization. It can be of a great degree also. The change can happen in a greater degree also. But let's come to these four interacting variables. These four interacting variables are the dimensions of change. Now the task would mean the activities which is being done by the organization. Basically, task means the business of the organization. What business are they in? What activities are they in? What kind of utility are they creating for the society? So that is the basic reason for existence of the organization. So generally the task is given, is fixed. It does not change. Generally. Why do you say generally? Because that is the reasons for existence. That is why the organization was actually formed. If that task is taken away and changed, the organization ceases to exist. Right? But then sometimes it happens. Like, for example, a lot of organizations outsource a part of their work. There's a whole industry which has come up, the call center industry, because of that. An organization wants to cater to the specific needs, troubleshooting needs of the customer, of their own consumers and customers, right? But during the course of the growth of the organization, they felt that if we try to focus on the troubleshooting part, we may not be able to focus on the product. We may not be able to give them proper quality product. So what they did, they assigned that work of troubleshooting or servicing, maybe after sales service, or XYZ, any of this uh, you know work which is not in the direct line of their work, to some other organization. And these organizations, they did their, and they are still doing their work. The whole call center industry basically is dependent on this kind of. So what has happened, that task, that after sales service or that troubleshooting work was actually a main task of the organization, was a part of their work, but they downsized in that way, and then they gave it to another organization to account, to cater to the needs of the consumer. So that, in that case, the task has changed, but generally it does not change. Task means the activities of an organization. Okay. So what changes? The structure changes, technology changes, people change. What do you mean by structural change? Structural change means making changes in the overall structure of the organization. Overall structure, remember the organization structure, the chart? Yes. Wherein, if there is a need, we are replacing key personnel. If we feel that there is one level of organization which is not required, there is a line of managers in between who are actually slowing down the work rather than helping them out, because the basic work is being done by the workers and the supervisors, and we just need the middle level people to handle them. And there is a whole level of lower level managers which is there. We might do away with them. Okay, by modifying the structures. The structural change happens how? By replacing key personnel, by modifying the structure. If we feel that some departments need to be taken away, some responsibilities need to be shuffled, that is what we mean by modifying the structure. Or some designations or some posts need to be dissolved, that also can be done. Centralization versus decentralization, we've already gone through this word too many times. So if you're making changes to that, certain things you are delegating and certain things you are taken away, you're decentralizing. That can also happen. Broadening or narrowing the span of management, that's also a structural change if need arises. Redefining communication channels, in the sense that you were possibly asking for a report, but now you're wanting them to enter into a software, the details in a software which generates a report on its own. Relocating authority, if you feel that one position, one department is not actually able to utilize the authority given to it properly, then that authority can be taken away from those people and given to some other um, part of the organization. Eliminating staff positions, this happens most of the times. Whenever there is some crisis in the organization, the first people to go are the staff people. They will reduce the computer people, they will reduce the security personnel, they will reduce the other staff functions like housekeeping, and retain the line functions, the salespersons, the accounts people, the production people. Okay. Structural change can also be can also happen through new administrative guidance in the sense of new policies, new procedures, which would be more effective, right? Okay, the second dimension of change is technological change. A lot of organizations go through a phase where their technology becomes outdated. The television industry, the vehicle industry, the textile industry, the mobile industry, all industries have gone through this. Organizations invest in technology, build their position in the marketplace. One fine day, some other new technology comes in which challenges, which is more cost effective, which is more efficient, which is more quality wise, it's good. So the organization has to adopt to the new technology. A couple of years down the line, new technology, again, a technological change happens. A new technological change is happening in the vehicle industry, electric vehicles. Some developed countries are basically, have having a number of electric vehicles running on the roads. So that's a part of technology. The other petroleum based vehicles would become outdated. Okay. Anyway, so technological change also is required. It aims at improving efficiency of machines and workers. Obviously technology is for the advantage of the organization, but yes, when you're trying to change technology and trying to modify your offering around the new technology, it has a lot of cost considerations also. Current technology is improved when technological change happen. Workers efficiency improves when technological change happen, but maybe they lose their jobs also. That also happens. Better coordination between jobs happen because of information technology. Better plant layout happens because of new methods of designing and all, right? Okay, behavioral change. So let us just summarize a little so that we don't lose track. We are talking here. We are talking here of the dimension of change in the sense where all we need to make changes. So we said the task need not change most of the time. In a very few cases, the task changes. We have to make structural changes if we have to adopt, to the environment. We have to make technological changes if we have to adapt to the new environment and the changes in the environment. We also have to make behavioral changes if we have to make changes in the environment. Not make changes in the environment, we have to meet the changes in the environment. Okay? Right. What do? You have to train your people. You might be required to change your employees by making them more skilled, making them more up to the mark to meet the competition and the changes in the environment. Change can happen at three levels: knowledge, behavior, and attitude. So, when you're wanting to change people, it can happen at three levels. Knowledge is very easy because you want to educate people, you will have to educate, give them new knowledge, and they will be able to manage the change. Behavior, if you want to change their behavior, because possibly sometimes we have to change the behavior according to the changes in the environment or the changes or the need for, you know, in the effort to increase efficiency, you need to change behavior patterns. But they are a little difficult to change because of habits. Sometimes you have to change the attitudes of people because the kind of people that you have at the moment are not able to meet the new challenges. But changing attitudes is the most difficult thing that you have to do, yeah, that you can do, right? So behavioral change can happen, but it needs a little effort. The second thing, we were talking of dimensions of change. Let's come to the process of change. How does change actually happen? There are three phases in the process of change. The three phases are unfreezing, changing, and refreezing. Okay? What do you mean by unfreezing? You are able to see this the document. I hope there is no problem with the network or no problem with the presentation.
Yes, ma'am. I'm
Okay.
following.
Okay. So the process of change, I said the first phase of the process of change is unfreezing. Now, what is freezing? Freezing is what freezes? Ice freezes, right? And here we want to say that people are actually adverse to change. No one wants to change. No one wants to be uncomfortable. Everyone wants to be sitting comfortably, doing whatever they are doing comfortably, without being questioned, without being disturbed. Okay? So the word unfreezing means that we need to jolt them, we need to shake them up, and we need to get them ready to change for the betterment of the organization. So, unfreezing means motivating and making people ready for change. Unfreezing is the most difficult phase. Why? Because people don't want to change. There is resistance to change. Let's take an example. A new software has come up which needs to be implemented, which needs learning by the people of the organization, which means regular updation by the people of the organization. So now they have not been doing anything of this sort for a long time. They were only writing manual reports, but now they're supposed to use computers and enter it into the computer. So the first thing, they would resist because why? A lot of things. They would be resistance because they are habitual. They don't want to do something else other than what they're doing. Their perceptions might, they might perceive it as being very um, dangerous, maybe not good for them. They may believe that they are not good enough to learn a software because they don't know computers that much. Sometimes their values also might not in this case, maybe some other case, values might not also allow them. They think established relationships will alter between in the organization. Maybe uh, you know they would not be interact with people. They would not be able to interact with people the way they've been interacting. In some cases, image, they would be concerned about their image also. Suppose if they are told, suppose there's a new change happening that you have to keep your work area clean. It is your responsibility. No one else will come and clean your area. They might think that, look, it is not it's not according to my image. I cannot do that work. Fear of lowering of rank in some cases. Fear of retraining. They don't want to train themselves. Fear of learning new skills. They may feel that they might not be able to learn. Fear of higher standards. They might feel that if I learn this, then I will have to do more work. And finally, fear of loss of employment. That if everyone learns to do this, I might lose my job because my job will be done by the computer now. Okay? So unfreezing is the most difficult phase. Second stage of the process of change is changing. The actual change. Yeah, what does it mean? Identification of change and internalization of change. You've already in the beginning decided what is it that you want to change. When we were talking about the structure or the people or the technology or the task, and you've already now in the first phase made people ready for change. You have, spoken to them, you've held meetings in the organization, you've sent them directives saying that, look, because we are facing such a bad time, we need to change so and so things, we need to get a new software, and everyone needs to learn that software, and we will have to then start, using that software that will increase our efficiency, and this and that. This you've already said, and people are ready. So now you'll have to bring the change. You can bring the change in two ways. You can either unilaterally impose it upon them, or you can be participative and let employees come up with proposed changes, how to handle the situation. Okay? Between these two extreme phases lie several variations, allowing various degrees of freedoms in problem identification and problem solving. So, when the change mechanism kicks off, there could be a variety of scenarios, variety of situations which can exist, and it could also differ from employee to employee, or for department to from department to department, or from level to level. At the grassroots level, possibly you will be more directive. You will have to just tell them that this needs to be done and you have to learn. But at the middle management level, you will have to be more participative, and you will have to, involve them in discussions and understand how the change can happen, and how you can get more and more people to cooperate and adapt to the change and help with the change process, in fact. Okay? So, while making a choice between these two approaches, between these two extreme approaches of being directive and being participative, there are certain points which will be taken into account. If the employee's maturity level is good, then you can be more participative because they understand the organization, they understand the problem, they understand the need for change, and you will be able to relate to them and communicate with them easily. Position power of the change agent. The person or the individual or the top management people, let me not say top management, whoever is initiating the change, if that change agent has the positional power, then he can be directive because he or she has the power, like we were speaking yesterday, to either hire people or fire people, give them punishments or rewards, increase their salary or decrease their salary. When that kind of freedom is there with the change agent, then he can, adapt the directive approach because people will listen. Sometimes in the initial stages, if there is resistance, later on, as and when employees and as and when individuals in the organization understand the benefits of the change, they would be more open to the idea of that change. But in the beginning, that directive approach can be employed. Communication pattern in an organization, if it's more informal or formal, whatever. If it's formal, then it has to be directive only. If it's more informal, then it can be, one-to-one communication. And in general, informally, these things can be taught to the people, can be brought to their notices, their queries, their suggestions, their apprehensions, they can be addressed. So, in those cases, participative style of change can happen. Balance of forces and consequences also need to be considered. What kind of power equations are there in the organization? They need to be considered before embarking on the change process. Because you do not want to create conflicts, you do not want to create situations where there are open confrontations of some sort. So you would need to understand, all people in the organization who are change agents would need to understand how to go about handling different people in the organization. Consequences for the change also need to be worked out. It is quite possible that the change on which you are embarking, the kind of change that you want, the benefits of that change might not be that great. So when the benefits are not that great, do you need to should you be rocking the boat? Those things need to be taken into consideration. Okay, right. So in the change process, we've seen that there are various dimensions that can be changed. And as far as the process is concerned, the first step that you're going to do is unfreezing, making people ready for change. Second is you will actually be making the change. The third part of the change process is refreezing. Refreezing means what happens is whenever you introduce a change, sometimes people will do it for some time. You know, suppose you're let's go back to our example of using a particular software for reporting. While you're watching, they would be doing it, but slowly, as and when the control aspects reduces, people might stop using the software and go back to their earlier method of working. So, to ensure that the change has been completely internalized, reinforcements and rewards need to be put in place. Till the time people are so used to the change that they've forgotten the earlier method of working. So initially the reinforcements and rewards or maybe punishments, they would be more frequent, and slowly the frequency of these rewards and reinforcements can be reduced and then completely stopped when the actual change has been internalized by the people. What do you mean by internalized? Internalized means they have learnt it so well that now they do not remember anything else. So that is what is internalization. That brings us to the end of the change management. Now, I'm taking a 1 minute break over here and asking you to come up with your queries. Please go through what we have done. Yes, I know. I know culture, we have to come to that. We have two topics left, and I would like to cover them today. In case you do not have any queries, let us go ahead with those two topics.
Yes, ma'am. We can proceed. I think there is no query.
Okay, then give me a minute. I'll come back. Okay. I'm having trouble finding that content, so I think I'll open the study material and from there we'll go ahead rather than wasting time. Where is it? That is unit 12, right? The culture, organizational culture is unit 12. Can someone confirm? I think it is unit 12. Someone said that. Okay. So presenting and then present. Thank you, Suleiman. Hold on. Okay, organizational culture. I think you must have gone through the this study material. We would use this to go ahead with our discussions. Now, what do you mean by organizational culture? We've looked at a lot of things as far as management functions are concerned. We talked of organizational change also, and we talked of motivation also. There are certain related concepts. That's the reason we are mentioning them here. Now, what is the main role of a management function? The main role of management function is to get people in the organization to work towards achievement of organizational goals. Why would people, though they have their own individual needs for coming in the organization and working in the organization, and they feel that the organization would be in a position to help them with achieving those their personal goals and fulfilling their personal needs, that is the reason they come and work in organizations. Still, their own motivations may fail to take them in that direction if the organizational environment or the culture is not helpful. So, what do you mean by organizational culture? And why is it so important? If we take an example, we are social beings. We may have our own skills, our own educations, our own attitudes, our own way of looking at things about working in a particular manner, but we do get influenced by people around us. We do get influenced by things that happen around us, and especially things which influence us in some way or the other. So, in an organization, when you're sitting in the organization, when you're working in the organization, the people around you, your subordinates and your superiors, the communication channels in the organization, the appraisal methods in the organization, the technology being used in the organization, the values of the organization, the way the ethical system in the organization, the philosophy of the organization, everything influences you as an individual or influences you as an employee in the organization. That is the organizational culture. Some organizations have an organizational culture which is very conducive to positive working, and some organizations have a culture which is not conducive to working. So, as a management person, as a person who's in charge of handling the whole organization, as a person who's may be responsible for the well-being of the organization, the top management should ensure that the culture of the organization is such that people find it easier to work, easier to relate to the organization's objectives. Only then their performance will be in line and help them coordinate with the other people in the organization to achieve the organizational goals. Now, what is important over here in this chapter is one, the definition. These are, let's come to. Looking for a particular definition which is very good. It's not given here. Okay, let's pick up any of these definitions. Deal and Kennedy defined culture with a clear and simple definition by depicting it as the way people do things in an organization. That's quite simple. Here, the organization culture includes the vision, values, norms, systems, symbols, language, assumptions, beliefs, and habits of the organization. Okay, the key terms which would basically help us distinguish between what is the organization culture, help us understand the concept of organizational culture are these. We have all heard of these words basically. What do you mean by culture? Culture is the existing beliefs, the attitudes, the norms, the customs, the habits which are existing in the organization at a particular given time. Values are the values of the individuals who constitute the organization. Right? So similar, basically what happens is when in an organization, people with similar values come up, especially during the formation of the organization. And they obviously want to take and want to appoint only those kind of people who are aligned with the values of the organization. That is why people have personal interviews in selections in organizations. Norms are certain set ways of behaving in the organization. Okay? And normative induction happens are when people are taken into the organization. They are, they go through the orientation program and induction to identify exactly what norms are followed in the organization and whether they fit into the organization or not. Ethos is a code of conduct, beliefs, philosophy. In fact, I would just say that culture of the organization is actually a combination of all these things. These are all an individual is defined by his personality. An organization is defined by the culture of the organization. And the culture of the organization is a combination of all the people existing in the organization. So all organizations basically, if they want to safeguard their culture, would take in people, would appoint people, because actually organization is it's not a living thing, but it is made up of living individuals. So the culture of the organization is made up by the people who are in the organization, and they need to be taken like that. They need to be appointed and they need to be molded into that kind of a belief. And the guiding point is what? The philosophies or the values or the ethics of the founding members. Typical features or characteristics of an organizational culture are: it is not present in all organizations, but yes, you can define an organization's culture in using these words. Alignment. Alignment would mean whether employees of the organization are in the the thinking of the individuals in the organization is on similar lines. One important element of organization culture could be innovation and risk taking. How risk averse or risk taking an individual organization is, right? Or obviously, it is the combined effort of all the individuals in the organization. We talk of people in terms of perfectionist. Organizations can be talked of whether they believe in precision or not. Level of management focuses on results and outcomes rather than techniques and processes used by the organization. So the one aspect of culture could be whether they are actually focused on achieving results, how oriented they are in achieving results. That could have ethical repercussions also, but that is another level altogether. People orientation would mean if the organization is more concerned about people rather than outcome, like we were talking about task orientation and concern for people yesterday when we were talking about motivation levels or leadership styles. Team orientation is something which wherein they encourage teams to work together rather than individuals. Certain organizations are known as being aggressive in the marketplace. They would go to any extent to kill competition. So that is one feature which any organization might have. Some organizations use Older organizations are more aligned towards stability. They do not want to take risks. They do not want to make unnecessary changes. They do not want to rock the boat in any way. Resilience. This is one quality where you see a lot of organizations when they want to enter into a market, they go without profits for a lot of time, for maybe a couple of years to get into markets. So this is an element of culture. It's not that every organization will have all these features, but when you look at an organization you will be able to define them in terms of these words. These words would help you understand the culture of an organization. You might define an organization as outcome oriented and aggressive. You might define an organization as team oriented and maybe people oriented also. Okay? So there are some features which define the organization's culture. Coming to the role of culture. Role of the organization culture works wonders. Three most important contributions are gives directions to the conduct of the business. Yes, when you know the personality of the organization, you know what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. The employees would know what to do and what not to do, in spite of not being told directly about it. Redefine the intra organizational line of communication, encouraging new idea development. Redefine the intra organizational line of communication, encouraging new idea development, not necessarily. But yes, in a way, since all the people in the organization are believing in the same culture, they would have a similar manner of thinking, similar manner of communicating, and ultimately generating new ideas in a similar line of thinking. High employee engagement and healthy turnover intention, if at all it is inevitable. What do you mean by that? High employee engagement is they are involved, high employee involvement in the organization because if the culture is, what would you say, very promising in the organization. And healthy and turnover intention would mean they would, if they have to go, they have to go, they have to leave the organization, but they go in a manner in which it is not uh, severing relations. Okay. Now I think the rest of the things which I'm skipping, possibly please read them and we can come with queries later on. Have you read this material earlier or no? We won't have time for the theories, but we can go to the end part. I'll just come to that. I would request you to go through all the theories, and then, and later on, if we have time, we can possibly come back and discuss those theories here. But at the moment, I would like to focus on the traits of great organizational culture, which we've already discussed to a certain extent when we were talking of the features. Okay? A great organizational culture would mean where the alignment of organizational values with employee motivation, right? In the sense that the employees' values and the organization's values are aligned, and obviously, then the employees would be motivated. Appreciation, use of public golden words. If the culture in the organization is such that they do not refrain from praising people or giving them due credit, that culture is good. It's an important trait of a great organizational culture, right? They do not keep themselves from praising people in the organization, appraising them properly and giving them due credit for what, if they do something good. Trust is an important trait again. Trust between the employer and the employee is an important trait. Only then the employee as would want to work properly and would want to, because he knows that he can be easily trusting and he would be given whatever he's been promised, and he would not be able to, he would not be put into a situation where he is, some uncertain situation where he cannot look for a way out. Performance. If the organization insists on performance, if the organization values performance, if the organization gives rewards to performers, that is a good feature. That is a feature of a good organizational culture. Resilience. Change being the only constant, resilience makes the journey easy and effective. If the culture is such that it promotes resilience among employees, not going back on promises, not going back when there's a tough path, if the if there are problems in the in the marketplace, the superiors guide the employees, tell them how to handle these problems, and resilience is taught to the employees. That culture would lead to good organizational performance. Teamwork, ultimately, individuals, individuals may not be able to achieve what teams may be able to achieve. So, teamwork, if it is promoted, that is a sign of a good organizational culture. Integrity is something which is a value highly valued by everyone. So, integrity, if it goes down the line from the organization top to the bottom, and everyone in the organization believes in integrity, nothing improper will happen in the organization. People will be truthful, people will be honest, even if there are trying times, people would know how to conduct themselves, and the overall culture of the organization will be then treated as very good. Another feature of a great organizational culture is encouraging innovation, newness, coming up with new ideas, giving suggestions, not judging people for coming up with new ideas, maybe rewarding them for new ideas. If that kind of culture exists in the organization, the employees will themselves come up with new ideas, creative ideas. And mind you, people who are working in the organization and people who are closely related to the organization, they know what can be done, what better, how to make the organization better, because they are actually handling work and they're actually at the grassroots level. So they can come up with small things which can improve the performance of the organization. So innovation, encouraging people, is a good sign that the culture of the organization is good. Psychological safety, making people feel comfortable, making people feel rested, at peace, safe, not under stress, is a sign of good organizational culture. Okay. We have to run through them fast. Now, how do you make a good organizational culture? This is towards building sustainable organizational culture. Recognition, we already talked about that. If recognition is given, this route map is of 9 steps. When the organizational culture believes in recognition, gives rise to a good organization, improves the culture of the organization, gives voice to the employees, give voice to the employees. A good organizational culture would encourage expression of ideas, feelings, and opinions, human intervention wherever required. Organization is basically a neutral ground, but it might require, the employees in the organization might require some kind of human intervention and help at times. If the organization is able to give that, it is a good thing. Redefine culture advocates to be leaders. Okay, the people who know the culture of the organization are the people best equipped to deal with the other people. There should be some people in the organization who know how to teach good culture, good organizational culture values to the other people in the organization, so that we know that there is consistency in the culture of the organization. Okay. Outlive organizational values. Give me a second. Pardon me. Okay. So people who are outlive organizational culture, people who are basically a personification, and a living example of the organizational values, are a good asset to the organization, who are visible to the others also. And these men need to be praised and projected as good leaders, good employees in the organization. Forge teams. If you want to make good, if you want to make the culture strong of the culture of the organization strong, you have to actually pull in teams and then give strength to them, and make them work in the organization. Focus on holistic development, overall employees development. The focus should be on overall development of the employees, soft skill development, their training, their technical skill development, and everything. I think these are all points which are a little vague and nebulous. there are repetitive points over here, but then let's. I think you should go through and read them. Changing organizational culture. We've already talked about change management here. I think we should. I think we should be majorly discuss the points over here in this particular unit. So let us not. Uh, I would request you to go through the content here and come up with queries if any, and maybe I'll ask ma'am to allow me time to go through these topics if you have any queries. Let us come to unit number 14, uh, which we are supposed to complete and finish off today. This is unit 14 is corporate social responsibility and ethics. What do you mean by social responsibility? Let us come to that. Till now, what we were looking at was the organization is actually responsible for its own objective achievement, and the organization is also responsible for the employees, and the organization and the employees together, they have to have a good relationship, forge a good relationship, and achieve their individual and organizational objectives and help each other out. That is what we were looking at uh, till this time. But the last topic of the course tells us that there is something beyond the organizational objectives and the individual's objectives. So there are certain social objectives also which need to be fulfilled by the organizations. So it is there that the word corporate social responsibility comes in, right? So what is the social responsibility of business? Social responsibility is actually a very vague idea. If you look at the definition, um, we can possibly say that social responsibility of business is the expectation by the society to fulfill some needs, or social responsibility of business is the economic, legal, ethical, and other discretionary expectations that society has of organizations at a given point of time. I think there's a definition by that name here. So ultimately, what is social responsibility? Social responsibility is some role, some responsibility that the society expects the organizations to fulfill. It could also be put in another way, that social responsibility of a business is something that the organization does for the society, whether the society expects or whether the society does not expects. So when organizations run education campaigns, when they help natural calamity victims, when they set up foundations for the education of children, when they set up organizations for the welfare of women, or any XYZ social cause, it is social responsibility. In fact, social responsibility has now become important because it is being regulated to some extent. And organizations are supposed to spend a percentage of their revenue in social responsibility endeavors. Okay? So let us look at what this unit has to offer. Basically, this unit has a lot of case studies which you need to go through and understand, and then come up with obviously any queries that you might have. And I would obviously be there to get back to you on those. These are the definitions which you need to go through, and then there are, like, this is what I said, there are certain social responsibility examples here. Legislation in India, basically, so that is not very relevant. CSR expenditure needs to be a particular percentage of, I think it's one point some percentage of the Is this topic which we need to possibly look at? The top 10 drivers motivating the corporations to engage in CSR are economic considerations, ethical considerations, innovation and learning, employee motivation, risk management. I would have to look at this survey to actually give an answer on that first. I don't think it's. Personal ethics do not matter as far as corporate social responsibility is concerned. Let us look at the ethical views or theories which they have to. There are three theories that they're talking of here. One is the contractarian theory, the view, the utilitarianism view, and the deonton, deontological view. Morality is based on agreement. They've given a case study over here. I think these are all various views and case studies, dear learners. I think I would leave it to you to actually read them through, go through them. I would also look at the presence of these study materials, and then in case you have any queries, I don't think so. There's any need for discussion over here. What I would do is like, so there would be two. So there would be two units wherein, in fact, one unit wherein you would have to read and then come up with queries in case you have any, and then I would ask ma'am for a specific session where I can, help you out with your queries. At the moment, let us stop it here and then look at all the different units that we've completed, and let's wait for. Let us in fact deal with any queries that you have if you've gone through all the study material, and I should be in a position to explain those things to you right now. Can we have everyone come up with a query, please, so that the rest of the people can also benefit?